Greg Denning are the co-authors of The Extraordinary Family Life Formula, which they designed to help high-achieving families like yours to live the life of their dreams. They work together as entrepreneurs while simultaneously raising and world schooling 7 children. They love to travel extensively as a family and create unforgettable memories and experiences together. The Dennings offer courses, master classes, executive coaching, and international adventures for couples and families, and I cannot wait to get this discussion started. How are you guys doing?
Yes.
Awesome.
So
Thank you so
fantastic.
much for having us.
Yeah, this is going to be really fun. But let's start. I know you guys, but let's start by having you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves and your family.
We have been married for almost 20 years. So, and we have 7 kids. Man, we had 4 kids. No, I was pregnant with our 4th when we started to get these ideas about traveling. And we actually took a trip when I was pregnant with our 4th, and we went to Playa del Carmen, Mexico. And while I was there, that was like my first time really out of the country. And that was back in the days when you didn't even need a passport to travel. So I just went with my birth certificate, well, to travel to Mexico. And we went and did this all-inclusive thing, and it was really nice. But then we went to the real Mexico one day, and I had this almost spiritual experience of like interacting with another culture and another language. And I just felt this connection kind of to humanity, right? And I had this very strong desire to like have my children have that experience. I wanted them to learn another language. I wanted them to be immersed in another culture. And so we literally went back to our hotel and I was like, "Hun, let's move to Mexico." He was like, "Okay, let's do it." So we decided that fast, flew back home. I was obviously pregnant, so we waited till we had the baby, but we packed up everything, rented out our house, and we took off. In the meantime, we decided to go to Costa Rica instead. So we actually drove to Costa Rica, and that was the beginning of this travel addiction that has continued. So we drove, and which was crazy because we were terrified of doing that, but it was amazing how we crossed all these international borders, but we also crossed a lot of psychological borders. Yes. We overcame a lot of fears doing that. And then we really became addicted, I joke, but I think we're addicted to traveling. And since then, it's been at least almost 15 years, 14 or 15 years, and we've traveled with our kids and lived in 37 countries. He's actually been to 44 countries. I've been to 37. So, that's the benchmark for the family. Yeah, and it's been a pretty amazing, incredible life that we intentionally created because we just had this dream that we wanted to follow. So
okay.
that's
that is so cool. I want to dig into that. Do you have anything to add before we just get started, Greg?
Well, I guess the beauty of it is we kind of went backwards. Instead of choosing, I had a career, and then we thought, we want a different lifestyle as a family, and I loved my career. It was amazing. And we stepped out of that, and so it forced us to we chose lifestyle first as our main priority, our family first, and then build a career around that. So it forced us to become lifestyle entrepreneurs and to be creative and hustle and bootstrap and fail on our faces and then succeed so that we can live a life of our dreams. And I guess the coolest part and the message we always love to share is like, if we can figure this out, then anybody can, and create their unique lifestyle. Right? It doesn't even have to include travel, but we feel like every family can like build the lifestyle of their dreams and live this extraordinary life. We don't have to acquiesce or settle for less.
Oh my gosh, we're like only a couple minutes in and we're already like so getting to the good stuff. Okay, so but before we like dive into all of this that you guys have created, because like I know, Greg, you come from just like a little bit of a different kind of background and upbringing, and you had to overcome a lot. So tell us a little bit just like quickly about that.
Yeah. So, I grew up in a kind of a broken family. There was divorces and stepdads, and it was kind of rough. So I ended up choosing to leave at 16, and I was out on my own. In fact, it's coming up next week. From the time of this recording, next week will be 26 years from this Christmas Eve as a 16-year-old. I was all by myself in a rundown part of town. Just sitting there. We didn't have enough heating, so I was just sitting there wrapped up in blankets in my little room, watching my breath in the frigid air, and totally alone. And I was insecure, and I was timid, and I was afraid, I was shy, I was ignorant and broke, and like this sucks, right? And it was like this major pain point that became a pivotal point, like where there's pain, there's power, right? And I just dug into that. I'm like, I'm going to create an amazing life. I'm going to create just a world-class marriage, and we're going to raise children and live this extraordinary life. I'm not going to live like this anymore, and I'm never going to allow my kids to experience anything like this. And so, man, I was hungry. I was desperate even to find the principles and practices of success and happiness, like how to build a happy family and an extraordinary life. And so I went voraciously after that quest, and I haven't let up. I mean, I still average like a book a week for over 2 decades, still learning, still sharing, still teaching now. And I get to do this every day, and it's amazing. So yeah, I had to make huge changes, a massive change. I had to become a new person so that we could live a better life.
Yeah, I love that. I've heard that story so many times, and I still get goosebumps because it takes me back to the lowest point in my life, kind of where I had to choose like this. I'm not going to be this. Like I am going to create something so much better. And it's so empowering to know that the human that is possible in the human condition.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. And you're so right. It's just this choice. It's this turning point where I say, you know what? No more. I'm going to draw a line in the sand here. And from here on out, like we're going upward and forward. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I love that so much. As an executive life coach, and I know you do this, Greg, but I think you guys do it a little bit together, but you're executive life coaches. So you coach high achieving entrepreneurial families. So what are some of the most important values and habits that high achievers like really possess and embody? Like what is the catalyst for success?
Oh, that's such a great question. And it's been so fun as we've wandered on 5 continents and both voraciously studied in personal development and peak performance and worked with literally families all over the world. Like we'd have to be like blind, deaf, and dumb not to see the patterns, right? There's patterns, there's common denominators. And that's what you're asking is like, what are some of those common denominators? And there's a bunch of them, but I think a few key ingredients is one, like a real high performer, they know what's important. And this is beyond lip service. Because it's easy. We all can talk. Like if we sit down and have a conversation, like we can talk about it.
Even more, I just want to point out something really quick. Even more important than just knowing what's important, they know specifically what's important to them. Yeah. Because it can be different for every person. And so they've gone through the trial and error of figuring out what is important to them. Because very often where people get off is they're trying to pursue someone else's dream.
Yes.
Or someone else's expectations or the societal norms. And so high achievers generally, they don't do that. They've figured out to not do that, and they're following what's important to them. They're listening to their heart. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, and it's spot on, right? Because otherwise we follow like what's called societal conditioning or societal scripts. Mm-hmm. And we hear these things and you think, well, I'll just do that because that's what I've been told to do.
Get the grades and go to college and get a career and then retire. And like, that's the path, right? We were on that path.
But the more fulfilling and meaningful path is to write your own ticket, to live life on your own terms. But that actually takes a lot more work than most people anticipate to get clear about what you want and then move past the lip service, because in a real way, we prove our priorities with our performance. And that's where it comes out. So high performers, they say no more often to other things that are outside of that. They are willing to sacrifice the lower things. They're not going to be wasting time, wasting life. I mean, they're on it. They know what matters and they go after it. They're committed. The second thing, they're committed to holistic greatness, like the big picture, because in a very real way, like the quality of our life, the quality of our marriage, the quality of our relationship with our kids, the quality of our business is directly connected to our commitment to greatness.
And not just in one area, because we can be great in our business and neglect the family and neglect the marriage and neglect our health. But our philosophy and approach is like this word holistic. We love that because you're integrating all of those aspects. Now, sometimes there are people out there and they're just going to be really great at one thing. And some, often they're like a monk or some spiritual teacher and they're devoting their life to that thing. But people who've chosen to have families, we have to be more holistically developed because there are a lot more people involved in our life.
A lot more pieces.
Yeah,
like,
and a lot more pieces.
It becomes non-negotiable. As soon as I choose marriage, I'm like, oh, I got another piece. And then when we have kids, like, okay, it's non-negotiable now. I have to be really good at marriage. I have to be really good at parenting. I have to be really good at managing things. And now we have world schooling or homeschooling and business together. We got to level up. And so you can't just roll along, like you can't let things slide. And so they're really good. And which leads me to another thing.
Or if you do let them slide, it's intentional for
get out of balance
rate,
intentionally for a moment. But we found and noticed that high performers, they'll do whatever. They'll invest to get the tools and the training and the coaching so they can like really win at work and at home. Like they just hit it. They hit the training. One of our favorite quotes is by Archilochus. He said, we do not rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training.
Interesting.
That's so powerful, right? We're looking up here, but it's our training that determines our level in life.
Which training to us means our skills, our abilities, our competencies, all of those things, which are all, we can improve all of those. Pretty much nearly everything in life is a skill. Marriage is a skill. Communicating is a skill. Parenting is a skill. So we can improve all of those skills, which is training. So when we improve our training, we improve our life, and it helps us to reach those high expectations we have. But we can't reach them without the training.
Oh, I love this stuff. This is what we get to do every day.
I know. I have this question for you, and it's not on the questions that I sent you, but I just feel so inspired to ask you guys, because you're talking basically about high achievers. You're talking about success. You're talking about expectations. What does it mean to be successful? And is that different for every person?
Ooh, so
yes,
good.
Such a great question. And a lot of people ask that. And I personally believe, yeah, there are some principles to success.
Some common denominators.
Common denominators. But they're ultimately, I think it depends. It comes back to that idea of following your heart, figuring out what you're passionate about and what you're excited about and what would make your life a success to you. And I think when you can figure that out, when you know what we like to talk about, when you can figure out what your personal life mission is and then pursue that, I think that's success. In fact, who is it? Earl Nightingale has a quote.
Yeah, it's the success is the pursuit, the
progressive
pursuit of a worthy ideal.
Yeah.
Right. So you're just moving towards this ideal. Here's the problem, though. And this is really fascinating. It comes up all the time. Is we all have these desires to have a really close connection, right? We want to have romance and passion and spark. We want to be best friends. We want to have, that life in our marriage like we did early on. We want to be connected with our kids, right? We want to have competency and confidence in the workplace and be winning there. And we want respect and we want to be leaders, right? This is true for all of us. But what I find again and again and again, really good people, wonderful people, they feel like roommates, or they feel like their marriage has gone flat and they're just existing together, or they feel really distanced from their kids.
That they have no influence over their kids.
I can't influence my kids. I can't connect, or they feel like it doesn't matter what I do at work. I'm not gonna win. I'm not gonna succeed. And so then what happens is they start to feel really ashamed and hurt, because this literally came up just a day ago. Somebody said, I feel really ashamed when I'm not being who I know I could be.
Mm-hmm.
And any time that we're living below what we're really capable of, it just tears us up inside. It attacks our self-esteem and our self-confidence. And so we're just getting this turmoil and things are off. And so these little pieces start to fall off. So are we being successful if there's broken pieces or pain points that are perpetual, right?
And we believe that is actually a good thing. It's kind of like we were talking about before. It can be painful, but it can bring you to that point of power where it becomes a turning point where you're like, you know what? I'm not going to settle anymore. I know I have more within me. I know I have potential, and I'm going to reach for that and go for that. We use this term a lot, divine discontent. I think it's it is a spiritual thing that's driving us to continue pursuing that potential that we know is within us.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Okay. So talk to us about then the extraordinary life formula. What does that mean and how does that help us in the pursuit of excellence or success?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So as we were working with families and couples and noticing the patterns, Rachel always kept talking like, hey, we got to come up with this recipe or a formula, something that just works. It's a set of principles and practices that anyone can follow to get a desired outcome. And in family life, like we just mentioned, it actually gets quite complicated, right? There's a lot of moving pieces and you have to assume a lot of roles. I'm going to keep repeating myself on this because I think it's so powerful. In order to be truly successful in a holistic way, there's just no exemptions, no exceptions. We have to become really good at several things. And so the formula, we kind of put it together, like what are the main elements, the non-negotiables that have to fit into this life? And if we can create a formula around it, then anybody can plug into it. So the people listening, these wonderful families, the couples, they can plug in and start bringing the spark back to the marriage. They can bring back this feeling of like self-confidence, but like, hey, I got this. Like I'm controlling and directing my life, and they put all the pieces back together.
Well, I know from experience, some of the most frustrating times in my life have been when I felt, especially as a parent, like I have no clue what I'm doing. Like I can't figure this out. That's a very disempowering feeling. Yeah. And so we've noticed from our own experience, from reading, we read a ton. So we've read tons and tons of parenting books. We've watched families, and we've kind of gathered these common principles that we're like, you know what, this works. When you use that in multiple situations, this is just what works. And it's not based off of, we love to compare it to parenting tips and strategies and techniques, which we feel sometimes are more band-aid solutions, or like you're dealing with the symptoms. We like to focus on the true healing. We like to go upstream to the source of the problems and say, okay, how do we solve the source up here so that these problems aren't coming out downstream? When you can do that, that's when family life starts to get really awesome. Like we have 4 teenagers right now. We love it. It is so great. We just will stand up in the kitchen and have all these meaningful, deep conversations. Like literally our kids are our friends. We do all these fun activities and adventures together. We love it. And so I think that comes from focusing on the source. There's another way of looking at it. It's a pyramid. And when we focus on the top, that's what things that are going wrong that you're trying to fix. But the whole rest of the bottom of the pyramid is helping things go right. So you're focusing on helping things to go right and creating true solutions, long-term solutions to problems. That's what we've picked for the formula. That's the basis of what it is. So we honestly don't have time to go through all of it, but we're going to talk about the...
So the 5 elements are you, then your marriage, and you work in order. So you work on yourself first, then your marriage, then your parenting, then your family culture, and then your family finances, right? And you can't, which one of those would you leave off, right? If you want to have an extraordinary life, you're like, nah, no, marriage can go, or I can go, I'll let go of my health, or finances, they don't matter. Like they all matter. And then you take these principles and practices, which we explain this in the full formula, and you just apply these same principles to each of those areas.
We could name the principles.
Okay. So
and then the concept behind it.
It's an acronym. It's METAL. And so it's mind, getting your mindset right, and just your thinking straight, just get in the right headspace. Then it's emotions, right? And most of us are super emotional, and most of our decisions, we think we're logical, but most of our decisions are emotionally based. And if we do some emotionally stacking in the wrong direction, really just, it hurts those areas of our life. Then T is for trust, A is for action, getting the real results, and L is for lifestyle. And you got to have that lifestyle piece. And so if you take each of those and then apply it to each of the elements of the formula, then you start work through it. And so what you're doing is you're just getting far more strategic about getting the quality of life you want.
Because one of the insights I had as a younger mother was, if I were running a business, I would be a lot more strategic about what I was doing. And in fact, I heard the comparison one time that if I ran my business the way I ran my family, that my business would be bankrupt. So I kind of took on this idea of like, I need to run my family more like a business. I need to be strategic about it. I need to train my children like employees. I need to, like I need to be diplomatic. I need to be influential. And I took this approach of being strategic about family life, and it just changed everything.
Yeah. That's powerful. That's super. And I love that you guys love acronyms because I love acronyms. I think everything should be an acronym. And I watched this video, and that's when I reached out to you when you talked about your acronym of CONNECT, which is one of like my core principles that I teach. I love how you created this acronym for CONNECT. So if you could just quickly go through that, but I love the CONNECT acronym.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. This is cool. It ties into my experience growing up where I was so timid and so shy. There was times I literally had no friends or family. I was the epitome of disconnected. Even if I was surrounded by people, I felt alone. And so I got to this point, I'm like, man, I want to connect with people all over the world. And I would connect with, and we had the most extraordinary experiences of connecting with strangers, but I definitely need to connect where it matters most, right? And be really connected with my wife and children. So I just can't, I was sitting there a few years ago and I'm like, I got to put these principles in practice. And I came up with the acronym. And so the C stands for care, and just really leaning into, I got to care more. The more I care about her, I'm going to think about her. I'm going to think from her perspective. I'm going to spend time serving her, loving her, meeting her needs. But when my caring kind of sucks, I care about myself and I think about me and my needs. And it starts this rift, right? Same with my children, same with everyone. The O is to open up. I'm shocked. I did more couples coaching this morning. We do some couples coaching. I'm shocked. I'm always shocked at how little couples are sharing with each other. They just don't open up. And finally I pull it out and they're like, okay, I felt like this for years. I'm like, where did that come from? And why was that not shared like years ago? And so we have to open up. And I know that feels vulnerable. It feels risky, but we'll never have the level of connection we could unless we're willing to open up. The next N is another little acronym. It's NRG, so energy. And we have to bring energy into our relationships. In fact, I want to say this with tons of emphasis. Every single one of us must be responsible for the energy that we bring to our relationships. Because if I'm Mr. Grumpy Pants a lot, or I get angry, I yell, or I'm just, reclusive, that's an energy. And I have to be responsible for that energy I'm bringing. The next N is the needs. And we talked about that. Always thinking, what are the needs? What are the needs for our children? In fact, we talk about that a lot. If you can anticipate the needs of your children and meet them, oh my goodness, the behavioral problems go away. They go away.
Yeah, it's solving those issues at their source. Of behavioral issues are usually caused by unmet needs. So if we can meet the needs and anticipate the needs, it prevents behavioral issues from appearing.
Yeah. The E is for elevate, to like optimism, enthusiasm, just building, lifting, praising, noticing all the good things my wife does. Because every woman, I'm going to throw this in here, this little nugget, and most of you know this already, but it's worth repeating and emphasizing. Our wives and women, they desperately need to be appreciated and admired and adored. It's huge.
I think all people do.
Yeah, I agree. It has to happen. So are we elevating? Are we acknowledging that? Right. Are we praising? Are we lifting? Are we building? It's easy to slip into this, hey, you're doing that wrong. Hey, why don't you do that better? And we spend most of our interactions correcting. Or even some people slip into like condemning and insulting. It's super sad. Mm-hmm. The C on Connect stands for challenge. Challenge is the only way to grow. And so the best thing for me is for my wife to invite me to challenge me, right? For me, for her. And then the T is teach. And again, my spouse is the most important teacher in my life because she knows me best, and our relationship's the best, right? So she knows where I need to grow and improve, and she knows what I can do. And so she's my best teacher, right? And if we're teaching in those relationships, anyways, just awesome principles there that we can all apply that just help us really connect in the most important way.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. One of my favorite things I think about working in the marriage space and working with people like you guys, right, is like we teach such common principles, but we do it in such a different way. And so I love the idea that like either someone's going to relate to the way I teach it, or you teach it, or, you know, like hearing both of us talk about it together, it's going to click for them. Like there's just, I mean, it's simple. Like having a great relationship with your spouse is simple, but it's not easy. And so you have to learn, like I love when you were talking about the training, like you have to learn things about it. You have to practice and acquire the skills.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that there's people out there like you guys making it so dynamic and like living it and exemplifying it and teaching it. And anyways, I love this conversation. Okay. So you guys know I love talking about intimacy in the marriage relationship. I mean, it just fires me up. So how can we
love practicing intimacy in the marriage relationship?
Yes, I love that too. So and you guys are kind of the strategy people. So how can we be more strategic about making our spouse and physical intimacy a priority in the marriage?
Yes.
This
very
is so
great.
important.
And I think that you're pointing out something that's very important that people don't necessarily think about. Yes, I think you should be strategic about intimacy and sex, like especially with all the many pieces and the complications of family life. You have to be strategic about it or it gets neglected just by default. So there's been a few things that we have implemented along the way. I'm going to start with me. I'm a very kind of scheduled routine type person. So one of the things that I have done to make intimacy more meaningful and deep and relevant in our marriage is, it sounds counterintuitive, but I actually plan ahead. I schedule, I think about when it's going to happen. Because when I can do that, as a woman, and some men are like this, but I have a lot of tabs open in my brain a lot of times. And so I have to clear space mentally in order to be prepared to be intimate. So when I can think, and it's not like I literally put it on the calendar, sometimes I do, but if I mentally put it in my calendar of like, okay, this day around this time, then I'm prepared to make that happen. And I can clear my space, my calendar, my mind to be able to engage fully without, being constantly distracted about everything else I've got to do and have to get done. And I can't relax right now because there's too much going on. So that's one of the things that I've done that I think has made a huge difference in helping me be more engaged.
And it was so important for me to learn that about her, and for her to learn that, because I'm like, many guys are like, hey, I want sex every day, anytime, any day. You just tell me, I'll drop whatever I'm doing, I'm good. And I would think that way, and almost by default, I thought, why doesn't she think that way? I think that about her. Why doesn't she think that about me? And I had to learn that not only does the female brain operate differently, but Rachel individually operates differently. Yeah. And so, like, for the first few years, like we fought it. We fought the differences. One, because I didn't understand myself as well. And I think many people don't. They're like, they don't understand their own needs very well. And they definitely aren't understanding their spouse. But once it clicks, you're like, oh, she's got all these tabs open and she's very ordered and structured. So I need to work with that instead of fighting it. Right? And then early on, I want Rachel to share this. I wanted sex all the time. And she was
early on?
Well, it's still going. It's still thriving and strong. We are great.
We've been married 20 years too, and we've been married 20 years, and I've heard this thing where the sex drive slows down at some point, and I'm not experiencing that. I'm just wondering if you guys are not experiencing that either.
Nope, the drive is alive. The drive is alive.
Okay, just making sure I wasn't the only one. Okay.
But I want you to tell this whole
I have to know what you're talking about first.
Just early on where we talk about all the time because it comes up. Well, let me share this. So we have
the resistance.
Yeah.
The resistance.
The resistance. So because of all the coaching I do, I literally get to coach people every day. It's amazing. I love it. And great people, really successful people. But it comes up like the frustration, or, hey, we haven't had sex for weeks or months or years. And those come up and I'm like, oh man, like you're missing this gigantic piece of love and connection. And sex, instead of being this major source of connection, becomes a major source of contention. And it switches. And if sex is good, if it's right, like it's amazing and everything. It's far, I'm going to throw this out there because many people don't know, so I didn't know this. It's far more emotional than many people think it is. It's for good men, especially. Some men have cheapened it to be emotional, and they're selling themselves short. Any man who only sees sex as physical is just cheating himself from what it could be. It's really emotional, but we don't know that, and the emotional timing is there, and it can be so extraordinary. But when it's off, the world is off. Like, especially for men, like if the sex life is off, it's like, what's the point? There's no hope in the world. Like it literally affects everything. And so I'm thinking this way. And then early on in our marriage, she's like, what's wrong with this guy?
Because this was something I had to learn about him.
Yeah.
My brain and my drive is not the same. And I didn't fully understand it. And I was like, what's the big deal? Like, yeah, it's been a week. Who cares? And I had to learn to understand how he works biologically and mentally. And that it's not just something bad or negative, that it's actually a very positive, amazing thing. And one of the things that I love to see now and love to teach is that sex is almost the starting point of marriage. Like it's almost the root, the core, the center. Because without sex, you really are just roommates or friends. But it's the sex that connects you as a couple. So if it's off, if the sex is off, then it automatically throws other things off because it's the center, right? So you have to get that right in order to fix everything else that's going on in your life. And so what he's kind of referring to is earlier on in our marriage, I didn't get it. And so instead of understanding at that time, I became resentful and I became resistant, right? So that's what we're calling it, the resistance. And it was amazing. We were talking about this the other day because he'd done a coaching session and then we were discussing this. And I'm like, man, it's amazing the amount of energy I used to put into avoiding sex, right? There was this time where I would, and understandably, I've birthed 6 babies. We adopted our oldest, birth, young babies, nursing. That's not always the best time for sex. But even besides those times, there would be times when I would be resistant to having sex, and I would actually put a lot of energy into thinking how to get out of sex and how to, all of this. And I was like, when I finally was able to make that switch and say yes to sex instead of no, I was like, wow, I've literally freed up all this mental and physical energy that I was putting into this by just, you know what, we're going to do it. We're going to connect. We're going to have fun. And then, we move on. It's incredible how much that changed our marriage when I was able to do that, because the energy now flows into the relationship instead of pushing you apart.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the way you describe that as the center, because I do think it's so funny, because for a little while I was talking a lot about sex and people would constantly message like, why are you talking about sex so much? And I'm like, because if I'm going to help people in their marriages, that's such a fundamental piece. So I love the way you describe that. It is the foundation of the marriage. Like, there's no getting around that. But also something I learned from you guys over a year ago. I remember our last interview, and you talked about how, and you kind of touched on it. I thought you were going to say it, Rachel, but you said, you taught me that sex to a man is kind of like a conversation for a woman. And so it's like, so what, we haven't had sex in a week? That's not a big deal, right? And it would be like Greg saying, like, so what, we haven't had a conversation in a week? Who cares? Like, right? it is that important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up,
Yeah.
because it's very true. And that was something that I had learned. I finally had this realization of like, well, yeah, what if he didn't talk to me for a week? I would be irate. I would be like, you know what? Forget you. And that is what it's like emotionally. It's like that for a guy with sex.
Yeah. And so like on a practical level, if I come home and I'm like, babe, I'm just too tired. And she's like, I just want to talk to you. I'm like, maybe later. Oh, that's just so painful, which I didn't get. And she didn't get it the other way, where I'm like, babe, I really want to connect with you. And she's like, I'm too tired. Oh,
Mhm.
right. And so it became, all this energy was going into contention and frustration and hurt and unmet needs. But now when we start to understand each other, we're like, oh,
You really need to connect. Well, I am tired, but I care about you and I want to keep that connection. It's easier to just have sex or have the conversation
mm-hmm.
instead of the resistance.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So good. Okay. So in your experience, what is the interplay between an extraordinary family life and a successful business and being able to juggle all of it?
So good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, well, this ties in perfectly from what we just came off of, like with sex and prioritizing your marriage. Like you have to make some of these things non-negotiables. Like you got to establish your standard. So you go on a date.
What's most important to you?
Well, and to us.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So like for us, like a weekly date, non-negotiable. It just happens. Every once in a while you miss, but not twice. Like we're not, oh, well, I'll miss it again. Like you have to step away from the business, step away from the kids, and really connect. You got to be having sex regularly. And our schedules were off and kids were off and work were off, like all these things. So we like, okay, what will work? And we're like, let's have sex at lunch breaks and during the day. That works for us. We both work from home. And so we have sex all the time, but usually during the day and not at night when we're exhausted. So be willing to like, when will work? Let's go work out right now. And then let's meet up and like make it a priority.
And then on the other side,
again, be blushing, but I love this conversation. Let's keep going.
But then on the other side, when it comes to business, we both know, like, okay, he's in his office, I'm in my office, we're working.
Yep.
And we respect that. You know, I don't just come in and emotionally
dump something
on him, right? Of like, you know, I respect that he's working and he respects when I'm working, so that you decide what the most important things are, and then they become those non-negotiables. And to maintain a good family life, we have to do these things. To maintain the business and help it grow, we have to do these things. For our relationship, we have to do those things. And you do them. And if you miss once, fine, but don't miss twice.
And don't let things like perpetuate. And then, okay, we got to throw this in here. Sometimes you got to throw some big stuff out there, right? So we'll do overnighters. Rachel and I just went and spent 3 nights together. We left the kids here and we went and spent 3 nights over, and we'll do that maybe quarterly. And then every year we do a huge trip, 10 to 14 days, just us. Last Valentine's we went to Thailand. It was amazing. Led a couples trip there. This year we're going on this cruise around the Galapagos with other couples. Like you pull out the stops and you make it special. You make it extraordinary. And then on the day-to-day, like Rachel was already explaining, you get the right tools and the right training. It's almost like if you're trying to be entrepreneurs and have an awesome marriage, an extraordinary lifestyle, and a family, raise kids, you got to have the right tools, or it's like trying to build a palace with a screwdriver. It's going to suck. And you're like, this doesn't work. And you're going to feel hopeless and helpless and discouraged and irritated. And your irritation is going to come out on your spouse and on your kids and everybody else.
And your business.
And your business. And you're like, this just sucks. It's not possible. But it is. Like if you have the right tools and training, you gotta optimize your life.
Yes, I love it. Oh my gosh, I don't want this conversation to end. We're getting to the last question, which is, if you had the undivided attention of all the married entrepreneurs in the entire world for just a few minutes, what is the most important thing you could teach them about creating an extraordinary life?
Well, Greg just touched on it actually, and it's the vision. Because honestly, without a vision of possibilities, you can't accomplish anything like that. Brian Tracy once said that the reason, this is related to wealth, but he said the reason most people never become millionaires is because they are never exposed to that as a possibility. They don't know anyone. They haven't seen someone create millions. They don't know that that is something that they could do.
Mhm.
So that is the first thing that we would do, is help to give the vision to people of what an extraordinary family life looks like, and then show them that it has been done in our own life and in others' lives. You can go from, a homeless teen to creating an amazing life that's full of, passion and romance and amazing kids and travel and money and all of this. It's possible to do that. So the vision, I think, is the very most important thing.
So good. Oh, so good.
To learn more ways to deepen your intimacy and strengthen your relationship, make sure you watch this video next on